But where I'm from in the UK, in
Yeah.
Yorkshire, it's common in the local dialect not to use the article.
Really? Well,
Yeah.
that's something I didn't know.
Yeah, if you want to sound like a Yorkshire person, you just drop the article, you know.
I
Pass us salt, would you? Instead of pass, could you pass us the salt? Or could you pass me the salt?
You are now listening to the IELTS podcast.
So you said that you work as an examiner.
Yes, I've been Cambridge ESOL examiner for 14 years. I don't do IELTS though,
Okay, no worries. That's
as an
fine.
examiner, as in I don't examine because I'm also a centre exams manager for a centre,
Right.
ESOL centre, so my plate is pretty full. IELTS examiners is much more demanding, so I do prepare students for IELTS. I've been doing that for the last 14 years as well, about.
Yeah,
But I don't examine IELTS. I examine up to proficiency level, all levels of the Cambridge exams.
I see. And when you are doing the questions, for example, if you're preparing a student for the IELTS speaking, um, when you do the follow-on questions after the cue card,
Yeah.
yeah, what are you looking for? What are you are you testing weak areas that you've heard before, just to clarify, or just checking higher echelons of their ability? What?
By the time you reach that section of the exam, you know, when you're doing the exam with students speaking, you've got a fair indication what their mark is, what they should be, what band. In that part, the follow-up questions, I usually try to see if I can give them a better mark by seeing how well they've expanded and how what vocabulary resources they can, you know, put
Mm-hmm.
into that section of it. If
Mm-hmm.
it's if I'm not sure about a mark, you know, I'm thinking possibly they are a 6, they might be a 6.5, then I look at those follow-up questions, both vocabulary resource, grammatical resource, relevance,
Mm-hmm.
cohesion, coherence,
Mm-hmm.
and I look at all those points to try and see, is he a 6 or is he a 6.5? If I've sort of decided this person is a 6.5, as I said before, I look at that last part to see, is he capable of being even more? And there I would look at vocabulary resource and how well he expands on those questions and how well that he develops them
I see.
and
Um,
what the responses are exactly.
Excellent. You said relevance. Could you tell me a bit more about relevance, please?
Relevance means to be able to, I mean, there's no right or wrong answers usually with the follow-up questions. Relevance means that it's related to exactly what I've asked, the question that I've asked this person, that they directly answer on that topic and they don't just go jumping off, you know, taking the high road around and things. But they answer the question directly. They
Yeah,
can expand on it, but when they're expanding and give examples of it, again, the examples and the expanding of that question should be relevant to the question, not just things that, like it's something about the environment, and then they just try and put anything in about the environment.
I see.
What
I
I mean
see.
relevant. Relevance to the question, that the question that they're asked, that's the question they're answering.
I see. So the key really is to expand on the actual original question and keeping it very relevant at the same time.
Well, see, some students try to impress you by saying a whole lot of things about, they look at the general topic of like the question, they get the key word out of it and they just answer to that, you know, to that key word and they're not actually answering the question.
I see. And they've got
I've
to
seen this time, and as an examiner, I've been able, even though I don't do IELTS, I mean, proficiency level is pretty much, you know, at a
similar
high level.
level.
So when we get to the part 4, this is where you're going. follow-up questions or general questions about the theme or the topic. You see this happening here. Students that deserve to pass the proficiency or get a good mark will be relevant. They'll be coherent. They will answer the question. Others will just sort of blabber on using the key word and saying anything to just try and impress you, using vocabulary or resource, lexical resources or grammatical resources without really answering what you've asked them.
I see. So it's really a case of listening and determine very precisely and exactly what was actually said in the first place.
I think that part is, yes. In the cue card, they've got the opportunity to sort of give you an example of their language abilities and their lexical resources and that, because, okay, you have to answer what the cue card says, but there's the opportunity to say a few more things. So follow-up questions are questions that are, that are directly related to a certain theme or a certain topic, and you need to expand on that question only.
Excellent advice. And could you give, when you train your students, how do you train them to expand on answers?
On questions like that? Well, usually we do some sort of brainstorming beforehand. I'll sort of say the topic's going to be environment. I just say environment. I don't say anything else, for example. So they have to sort of build up, through everything they've done, their resources and that, or we build up a word bank, or they do some research and they do some homework and find different ideas. And then in the follow-up lesson, I will just have selected different questions, starting with very general questions, environment one, and then becoming more detailed, more specific questions, and see how they respond. Depending on how they respond, I will either interrupt them as they're answering, if they start sort of blabbering on without really saying anything, and stopping them and sort of say, let's try again from here, or be more specific. If they're on the right track, I just suggest you've done a good job, but you can do better by doing this. And depending on what they've answered and how they've answered, I guide them from there.
Wow.
Be more careful with your syntax. Be more careful with the vocabulary you use. Don't try and use vocabulary you don't know how to use. Because I found this happens with Greek students. I don't know with other students. This is something I come across a lot with Greek students. They learn, they're very good at remembering vocabulary and learning vocabulary, but then they just try to put it into a phrase or a sentence without really using it properly.
Like forcing it.
Yes.
I see.
They're throwing these little idioms or, colloquial expressions where they don't fit in, and and I definitely do not allow my students to do that. If anything else, we spend a lot of time talking, and I prepare them by just generally giving as many questions, and not just questions from exam books, any sort of question that is different.
I see.
That's my way of preparing them before we actually get into the actual part where we do a whole speaking exam as it is in the exam.
Right.
I won't go into, the whole part 1, part 2, part 3 until we've done a lot of preparation work beforehand.
I understand. I see. Now, when you said that you said it was common for the students to learn and memorize new vocabulary, and you don't recommend them forcing. So you're basically saying it's better to play it safe, use your trusted vocabulary that you know how to use well, rather than stretch it a little bit in an attempt to impress the examiner.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that exactly.
Okay, sorry.
No, I mean, yes, do that. I mean, play it safe, but if you're going to use some words only to impress without being sure how to use
I see.
then don't use it. Don't try and impress me by just throwing in a whole lot of words that without actually knowing how to use them.
I see. I see.
Saying learn the vocabulary, develop it, and sometimes when we come up, because there's different levels of students, so you can let's say push students depending on how good they are.
Hmm.
See that they are using new vocabulary and they're using it correctly, then you can push them that little bit further.
Okay. All right.
But I do always suggest that if they find difficulty or they're not absolutely sure of a question, yes, then my recommendation is it's better off playing safe and communicating correctly
Yeah.
and being relevant rather than being irrelevant.
Okay. Sound advice. Sound advice. And you said that when you are examining, you see a lot of students making mistakes, especially with the vocabulary. Could you give some examples of more common mistakes you see when you are performing as an examiner?
Grammar,
Uh-huh.
tenses, grammar, pretty much so a common mistake. And another common mistake is word order,
Of
syntax.
course. Yeah.
It's not possible to compare it with, okay, I prepare IELTS students from other countries, but as an examiner, I've basically only been an examiner where there's been Greek students only, so
I
I can't
see.
say. Okay, we get certified every year and we see different videos with from different countries students, but
Mm-hmm.
yes, so if we're looking at the students, the bulk of the students which I have examined, those would be probably common mistakes.
I see. I see.
Tenses and word order or grammar syntax.
Right then. And if you were preparing a student who had those problems, how would you help them overcome it?
Well, it would depend on what degree it is. If you've reached a level like you're in proficiency and you're still making mistakes with basic tenses, then I wouldn't have recommended you to take the exam. Definitely, no, I wouldn't. I mean, I don't. I will not. I'd rather a student stop coming to me rather than me send them off and being a failure. I want them to do their best, of course, and not everyone's going to succeed the first time.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you prepare? Basically, through exercises. There's no grammar in that. It would be theory, going through some of the basic theory. If I noticed it was a common mistake, it was a mistake in one tense, for example, the present perfect. It wasn't a general thing. It wasn't all tenses, but it was maybe one or two tenses.
Yeah.
It was going back again to the basics,
Mm-hmm.
looking at the theory, but I don't just do theory as in I'll explain the present perfect is used for this and this. I always use examples as we go along. I'll say present perfect means something that's related to the past and still exists now, may exist now. And then immediately it would be an example.
I see. I see.
I really firmly believe in giving students lots of examples as you're teaching whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is and getting them to actually participate through the lesson all the time. I found that by doing that, you get to the stage where the students will look for, things for you. They will they will check their mistakes, or they will check and think, I don't think this is right, Mary. Come back to you with feedback. And then for very, very weak students, basics and lots of drill exercises. If
Yeah.
we're talking about grammar, that would be the only way that you could overcome some of those problems. And the same would go for word order because it's part of the grammar.
I see. I see. And for a student who's studying at home, what activity can they do if they haven't got access to an online teacher or a language academy? Any recommendations?
Yeah, BBC quizzes, fantastic. Learn English on BBC, and then actually I've noticed lately more and more sites coming up. It's not just preparation for exams. There's lots of the British Council's got learning English sites,
Yeah. Uh-huh. So online.
and on those sites there's ones for kids, teenagers, and adults. So depending on their age,
Mm-hmm.
learning English, as I said, BBC. they're great exercises, and they're stuff that you could do just for a couple of minutes. And quite a few, most of them have an explanation. Not all of them, of course. I would suggest something like that to someone that didn't have access to a language academy or an online teacher for a start, and then possibly, if they could, to try and find someone at a later date. Because I do really think you need to have the contact with the teacher, whether it's online or in an academy, but you definitely need at some stage. Okay, there are unique cases where self-taught and self-learn, they do speak, but I don't think it's the majority. I hope not, or we'll be out of a job.
Yeah, well, I've met one or two self-taught students, and there was one guy, he learned from a machine, and it was so obvious when he talked, it was embarrassing. But yeah, I definitely agree. Up to a certain level, you can get there, and I also
basically starting off, basic English, and or an adult who hasn't had English lessons for years and wants to get back into it, and possibly by doing this they could remember some of the stuff they've already done and learned. But yes, you definitely need the contact with an English teacher. And English teachers don't know what they're doing, because unfortunately I don't know what it's like in Spain, but unfortunately here in Greece it's a tragic situation. Sometimes the damage that certain teachers do when they come to you is so bad that it's very to undo the damage.
Oh, what a shame. What a shame. That's horrible. That's sad. Yeah. Well, over here in Spain, I'll just quickly say, and then I'll let you go. But at the moment, it's quite really strong demand for teachers, and the good side is lots of people are learning, but the downside is there's a few cowboys coming over, like who were serving beers in the UK, and they land in Spain, and immediately they're an English teacher, and it's a bit sad. Yeah, I mean, what can you do? You just got to have your wits about you, and just get it all checked. But yeah,
I think in the long run, though, that sort of cleans out after a while, because I've notified people, they might ring me up and ask about lessons, and then they go off to someone else, because it's cheaper or something. It's more economic here than anything else. And then when it comes to the crunch, though, when they want to take the exams or want to prepare for the exams, they come to the safe bets.
To the professionals.
Well, I'll let you go, because obviously so.
Right then, well, thank you very much, Mary. Okay, for the listeners, if you want to get in contact with Mary, have a look go to the site, do a search for Mary, and you'll see all her contact details there. And that was an awesome interview. Thank you very much, Mary.
Thank you very much, Ben. It was lovely to meet you.
You too.
Nice
all the best,
day.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Remember to leave your email for updates. Remember to leave your email for updates.